Discourse is more than talk and writing. It is a way of talking and writing. To regulate discourse is to impose a set of formal or informal rules about what can be said, how it can be said, and who can say what to whom. When a form of discourse is established as standard practice, it becomes a powerful tool for reproducing inequality, because it can serve not only to regulate thought and emotion, but also to identify others and thus to maintain boundaries as well. Those who wish to belong to the dominant group, or who simply want to be heard, may feel compelled to use the master's linguistic tools. So far, we've discussed a lot, but one thing we haven't gotten around to yet is, what even is a game, to begin with? This question has gone on for decades now, and I honestly don't feel that the answer is as important as the question is, because the question gets at an underlying issue within gaming culture. Chris Franklin, the creator of the web series Errant Signal, made a wonderful video discussing the debate about what is and is not a game, titled That's No Game. I'm going to link it in the description, and he goes into just about anything I would have said about the answer to the question of what is a game. I bring up his video specifically because it gets very, very close to what I want to talk about without ever quite getting there. See, my video, this one that you're watching right now, is a feminist critique of gaming culture. Chris's video is a response to a cultural debate that was not looking at the cultural debate from a feminist angle, and there's no particular reason why he should come at it from a feminist perspective. I think his video is fine just the way it is, and I highly recommend it. So don't consider what I'm about to say about his video a critique so much as a response. During the course of his video, he mentions games that are explicitly considered games, and games that are debated as not being games. Throughout the course of it, he emphatically states that yes, Team Fortress 2 is a game. He says the same of Skyrim. By contrast, at one point when he collects a list of games that are considered not games, he shows a graphic that includes Animal Crossing, The Walking Dead, The Sims, Farmville, Dysphoria, Proteus, and Nintendogs. This fascinates me, because compared to the games that Quantic Foundry discovered tend to do well with women, Animal Crossing, The Sims, and Farmville could all be described as family/farming simulators, while The Walking Dead and Dysphoria could easily be considered interactive dramas, and Proteus is definitely atmospheric exploration. The only one that's ambiguous would be Nintendogs, though I'm willing to place it under family sim if I'm being generous. In other words, the games that Chris keeps pointing to as games that aren't real games are games that women like. Again, Chris wasn't coming at his video from a feminist perspective, but when I watch his video with the feminist perspective in mind, and with the statistics in mind, it becomes very clear that the collective definition of what constitutes a game within gaming culture has a prerequisite of needing to be appealing to men. You'll notice also that a lot of the reasoning for what is a game that Chris points to is also reasoning that lends itself well to the genres that traditionally do well with men. As Chris points out, gamers argue that games need a win state to qualify as a game, and shooters, action games, racing games, and sports games are some of the most definitively win state based of games. You know when you've won a race, or when you've won a game of football, or when you've blown someone's head off in a shooter. The absolute win state in gaming is most prevalent in these genres, and I do not think that's coincidence. I think that, whether consciously or not, the quote-unquote hardcore gamers try to retroactively define what a game is and is not by denying any quality a game can have that does not explicitly revolve around men's interests. And in a lot of ways, they've succeeded. My mom plays games more than I do, and probably more than you do. And while she is able to recognize her match 3 mobile games like Candy Crush as video games, a lot of women simply don't recognize it, or they dichotomize it as a separate entity from other kinds of games. My mom told me that she doesn't have a console, and that disqualifies her from being a gamer. A few survey respondents said precisely the same thing. Since they don't own a console, they don't consider themselves a gamer. This is boundary maintenance playing out in action. The problem of demoting mobile games to being non-games has been a common issue for a pretty long time now. But what I find so telling is that a lot of people who consider themselves gamers answered, "I play games, so therefore I'm a gamer." My mom also plays games, but she doesn't consider herself a gamer. It becomes evident, to me at least, that the framing for how to qualify as someone who plays games is one that alienates women from the conversation. If you play Candy Crush on your phone all day, every day for years, you're not a gamer because you don't play real games. As Chris points out, this limits the scope of what a game can be, but I think that's kind of the point, because recognizing and validating more feminized genres as legitimate games would pose a risk to the a male-dominated culture of games. It would mean more casuals. And this is where we get to an interesting usage of language. The difference between hardcore gamer and casual gamer is not always explicitly, but is often implicitly gendered. The concept of filthy casuals is a way of denigrating people who don't play a particular kind of game. That particular kind of game is usually going to be shooters and action games, which, yet again, are the genres that are most dominated by men. By extension, casuals are the kinds of people who play games completely oppositional to the hardcore gaming style, which, yet again, are the genres that do best with women. What this means is that the terms are loaded, such that one implies value over another, and also genders those very same values. Women are often seen as outsiders of gaming who invade gaming and aren't truly dedicated to gaming. My mom will be seen this way even though she's been playing games since the early 80s. I'll be seen this way even though I've been playing games since the mid-90s. The words hardcore gamer and casual gamer implicitly refer to a form of hegemony versus subordination. Hardcore gamers are usually men, and casual gamers are usually women, and this is asserted both in how the discourse around hardcore versus casual is framed based on genre, and also in the dynamic between masculine modes of gaming versus feminine modes of gaming. To be hardcore is to be obsessed with winning, with domination, with superiority. It is quite literally a construct of hegemonic masculinity, an ideal that, whether they intend it or not, is masculinized. This is, in part, why a lot of survey respondents rejected the label of gamer, because gamer as a term is tied to a hierarchy, and a lot of people don't want to participate in that kind of hierarchy. The idea of true gamers living up to a masculine ideal of competitiveness and domination shows why people find the associations so negative. To call yourself a gamer isn't just to call yourself someone who plays games, but also someone who participates in toxic ideals of masculine expression. Women don't consider themselves gamers because they don't participate in that aspect of the culture, and if they ever do, it's at their own expense most of the time. The problem is, when we continue to use this language of hardcore gaming versus casual gaming, we construct a dichotomy that doesn't need to actually exist. Games can, hypothetically, just be games, but gaming culture renders them in such a way where there is a superior form of gaming and an inferior form of gaming. This construction is explicitly masculinized in such a way where to be superior is to appeal to toxic men. Yes, these games often do appeal to people who are not toxic, as well as people who are not men. I myself play a lot of shooters and action games, and they're one of my favorite genres. However, when we put these genres on a pedestal and consider them innately superior in some regard to genres that happen to do well with women, we continue the process of alienating feminine perspectives from the culture, and male dominance continues to be an issue. As such, when we call someone a casual gamer or call certain games casual games, completely free of any critique of the implications of this terminology, we help to maintain a false dichotomy that validates the toxic mindset that a lot of men bring into gaming culture. There's a term and a lot of academic backing for this process. It's called othering. I'll talk more about othering in part 7, but here in part 5, I'd like to share some of the academic reading on the matter, pulling again from generic processes in the reproduction of inequality. The term othering has come to refer to the process whereby a dominant group defines into existence an inferior group. This process entails the invention of categories and of ideas about what marks people as belonging to these categories. The literature suggests that othering can take at least 3 forms. 1, oppressive othering, 2, implicit othering by the creation of powerful virtual selves, and 3, defensive othering among subordinates. In each case, meanings are created that shape consciousness and behavior, such that inequality is directly or indirectly reproduced. The symbolic tools used to accomplish oppressive othering include not only classification schemes but identity codes, which are the rules of performance and interpretation whereby members of a group know what kind of self is signified by certain words, deeds, and dress. To know the code is to know how to elicit the imputation of possessing a desired kind of self. Oppressive othering entails the creation of identity codes that make it impossible for members of a subjugated group to signify fully creditable selves. A code that treats a male body and Caucasian features as signs of competence preemptorily discredits those with female bodies and African features. Equally insidious are identity codes that define the adaptive or dissident behaviors of subordinates as signs of inferiority yourselves, thus turning acts of resistance into evidence that subordination is deserved and inequality is legitimate. The construction of a hardcore and casual dichotomy is, quite literally, coded language to construct women as being either external to gaming culture or at some level of inferior status within gaming culture. The idea of creating a powerful virtual self is manifested in gaming men describing themselves as hardcore and denigrating those who are, by implication, not hardcore. By being women, by playing games that are seen as women's games, or by refusing to exist in gaming spaces on hardcore gamers' terms, we become placed as the member of a subjugated group that can never be considered fully creditable. Women's interests, women's opinions and perspectives, and women's role in the culture will always be devalued, and this is because of the process of othering by men into a position where we have less sway and less say in how the culture operates. We're here in relatively high numbers, but we aren't represented. In part 6, I'll talk even more about complicated issues of the discourse of gaming.